You're on Global TV Talk Show again, and thank you very much for coming back. I'm in San Diego, and it's 24th of January, and the year has started slow, but now it's like rocketing forward. The days are going by so fast. Already planning February things and looking at May. Our special guest today is on the East Coast of the U.S., Rob PIANKA. And he's a specialist in thinking deep and broad about the world that we live in today, and of course have been, where companies have become giant because of taking advantage of, finding and taking advantage of flows of goods and services and materials across borders, across time and space, across cultures. Of course, that's been going on forever, hasn't it, Rob PIANKA?
Yeah, you can say that. I mean, in the sense that people have long been in contact with each other. But what's new is that somebody stirred the global pot, and it's all mixed up now. It's the things that we used to look at as being across the border from us, right, are no longer across the border. You don't have to travel to meet people who are not from your culture, who have a real stakehold in your life, who are have real power in your life. It's right. Local.
So let's just look at semiconductors for a second, okay? Intel is here in Northern California, just an hour flight from San Diego into San Jose. In fact, old friend of mine, who was a developer at the time, back in the early 2000s, like 2000, 2003, he actually set me up on globalbusinessnews.net way back then, before I knew what to do with it. This guy set it up. But Intel is making chips in all kinds of places, not just in Silicon Valley, but they started there. And then we have the Taiwan semiconductor industry, which is huge. They're investing like $5 billion next door here in Phoenix, which is a 6-hour drive, but it's only a 50-minute flight from San Diego. I mean, that's $5 billion. That is really a commitment. And they're not only doing it in Phoenix, actually in Chandler, Arizona, the suburb, but also in the Midwest of the US. So they're onshoring into the US, of course, in favor to get the tax benefits that President Biden is shelling out, and to build up our less dependency on China for the moment, anyway. So globalization is shifting. It's not going away, but it's certainly going to be different because of all these changes, right, Rob?
Yeah, it all depends on how you define globalization. And one of the things that you can remark is that there's a lot of different answers to the question: is globalization ending? Is it going to go away, or what's going to happen? And a lot of the variety, in the answers depends is based on the fact that nobody defines what they're talking about in the first place.
Yeah, right. What does it mean?
Yeah. And it's, I have a way of looking at it, and I call it the 3 G's in global agility. Number one, let's define globalization. Strictly, it is the technological developments like electricity, the steam engine, combustion engine, electricity, the internet, and the changes in economic models that the evolution of technologies enables. Right? You couldn't have had a global business before, when you couldn't report from one office to the other because they're too far away. Right. Well, with the internet, you can have a global business just as easy as a local business.
So let's go back into history. The East India Company, which was British, right? English. they were in these big sailing ships when Britain's Navy ruled the world for
Mhm.
a long time, and they set up shipping of sweets and minerals and all kinds of things from India and Southeast Asia back to Britain. All right, and then those guys also began looking at the U.S. What would become the U.S. going back what 300-400 years ago, right?
Mhm.
And then they set up, but people didn't go back and forth. I guess they did, but it took forever. And so uh, what's happened is that with technology and communications, companies could set up and could manage. It was still hard to do, but that's what you're talking about how industrialization has grown from helping one guy or one company into helping everybody, and now it's sort of out of control. And we're now reaping the benefits and the problems from that, aren't we?
Well, the control is an interesting question about it, because we tend to look at countries where you have law and rule of law, and then international relationships, which is relationships between countries that have laws, right? As being able to set up a playing field, an international business playing field, right? Accurate until about 40 or 50 years ago, right? There's a certain amount of degree of change that you undergo that leads to a qualitative change. And the fact that the East India Company, they had to sail through nowhere to get to somewhere in order to move something around. There are no nowheres anymore, right? We're closed inside one global border, big spherical border, right? There are and countries per se are not the organizers to the extent that they used to be of things. There
It's
is so
companies.
much going
Yeah,
on
yeah,
transnationally as opposed to
yeah.
national. The flow of money in and out of different currencies for investment dwarfs the tangible economy that we're used to talking about, industry and services and agriculture, that type of stuff. There's huge amounts of money, capital flowing around the world, and it's in terms of what it does, where it's invested, in things that we understand, like jobs and that. It's country agnostic. It doesn't matter anymore, right? And we're not used to that. There's a lot of reaction to globalization, which resents the way it's dissolved the national teams that we used to be part of, right? I can give you a list of 12 companies that you would think are American, 7-Eleven, Burger King, these types of things. They're not. They're not American anymore. The summits, the highest parts, the most technologically advanced, cutting edge parts of the economy are country agnostic at this point. Transnationals owned by transnationals, owned by conglomerates. It's a massive structure, which has pretty much dwarfed and escaped the control, right, of countries. And you just have to look at taxes. Where are corporations paying taxes? Well, not where they're making the profits, but where the tax rates are the lowest. Now, not a crime, but it's not part of the social contract that people from the 1950s would understand.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about the global agility idea, which means trying to get your arms around all of this without
number one,
without feeling isolated or stupid.
Number one, globalization it consists of economic technological and economic facts, non-negotiable, unless you want to turn off the electricity and the internet, right? Non-negotiable. It's out of the box, can't put it back in, right?
Got it.
The global system for international trade, WTO, the UN, government, international relationships, all that type of stuff. That's a whole system that's the economy is one of the things that has to manage. It is woefully behind in terms of the structure and the treaties and all that type of stuff. The transnationals have left it in the dust, right? Globalism, the third G, and anti-globalism are opinions about this. And I'm telling you right here now, looking straight in your eyes, opinions don't matter when they come up to facts. You can be for it, you can be against it, it doesn't matter, you can't put it back in the box. Most of what we hear are people who are in favor of or against it, but it doesn't matter.
So let's talk about like what's going on right now with, say, Google and Apple, and then a couple of years ago it was Microsoft, where the European Congress was trying to fine all these companies for doing things, I don't know what, monopolistic for sure, but maybe it's simple as that. But so it becomes a legal battle, not a moral issue. And they settle for these gargantuan sums of money. I can't even think about how many zeros it is. And the companies just move on, and they just keep doing their thing. And the treasury gets bigger in that, whether it's the European Parliament or some other place.
Yeah, to win, you have to be playing the right game. All of this stuff is what I call big picture stuff, and we can talk about corporate taxation or the internet companies and all that type of stuff, and be for or against it, right? But we can't do anything about it, you and I, right? I'm not a master of the universe or a CEO or the head of the EU or anything like that, and they can't even do anything about it because they're riding a Bronco horse that they're never gonna break it, right? The question becomes, right, given that this is the big picture, right, that we're enclosed with each other on this high-tech driving, fast-changing planet, right, with 8 billion people on it, what do you and I do? What do individuals do? What do we need to do in order to fit into that so that we can pursue our self-interest and represent our beliefs and our values? Where do we find traction and have people who have our back, right? So that we can not only survive all this disruptive change, but get up to speed and take advantage of it. If you can't beat it, join it. All right. If it's not going away, what do we do? Right. And for me, with the concept of global agility, it is, it can be used by anybody, right? But the people, the common man, as we used to call it, the common person, is the person I like to talk to most, right? What do we do as people, as normal people, right? Given that this is our circumstance, and it's almost a sweet spot in it, because people who have power, right, because of success, and I'm not arguing against power and success and all that very competent stuff going on out there that people calling the shots most likely deserve to, because they know a lot of stuff and they're in control of things, right? They can have the illusion that they can control their environment, but I can't. It's going to be laid down as a fact in my life, and I'm going to have to deal with it. Now, there's an interesting thing here. If I can come up with an answer for that, right? And if lots of people did it, you end up having a cultural renewal, so to speak, of the common person, of civil society, right? And civil society is the only counterweight that you and I have against institutions, right? As Democrats, small d, people, the plebeians, are walking around the earth, right? Not masters of the universe again, right? It's only our solidarity and our fitting in the world competently, right, to make a contribution that can really make the problems of globalization solvable, right? You go back to anti-globalism and globalism, the opinions about it. If you look at the publics that are out there in all these, like Brazil, the United States, anywhere you look where, globalization has changed things and there's a lot of strife, right? Really hard, even if you wanted to propose good policies on a governmental level, right? When everybody's mad, right? The people have to get oriented and fit in the situation and become more competent in order for there to be any chance that public policy could be advanced. If you go to the taxation issues, we just failed through Janet Yellen in the United States government, seemingly have failed for the moment, to create an agreement across the European Union and us that would compel, that would cut off any way for major corporations to avoid paying taxes altogether, right? It's like all you need is one country, in this case it was Hungary, or one state, often Delaware here, right, to say, we're going to tax profits at a 0%, right? And everybody makes an end of the year transaction, shifts all their profits, no matter where they made them, to this place where they don't have to pay taxes, and they do, and it's legal, right? Now, you can debate politically whether or not corporations should pay taxes, whether it's double taxation on stockholders or whatever it is, but I'm sorry, we got about 100 years of history where it was part of the social contract, where corporations made money, they paid for some of the roads and the policing and the electricity and the education of employees, right? And if you want to make a break with that so corporations don't have to pay taxes anymore, come out and say it and let's vote on it, right? But it's a really important question. Can the public assert its interests? Not if nobody in the public can assert their interest. When everybody is bypassed, left behind, and disoriented by the change that we're living in, right? We can't have any solidarity and assert our common interest in the Commonwealth. So it becomes a political issue, but it's not me making it a political issue.
So let's talk about, So let me jump in here for a second, and let's talk about going green, all right? And this is like a PR device, of course, but it's about electrification, whether it's wind, offshore air farms, wind tunnel farms, or and all that's huge investments. I mean, mega investments, long term, to protect the atmosphere by expanding the grid and making a new grid that will be less polluting, perhaps, and get things better done, made better, made different, using new technologies. So, like the electric vehicles. Okay, and here in California is very progressive, and they try new things until they stop working, and then they move on. But so, the goal here is to get as many millions of cars that are gas eating off the road in the next 10 years. Quick, relatively speaking. But how do you do that? And how do you build an electric grid that's more plentiful than now and more secure, that can handle charging up millions of cars overnight? Mm-hmm. Where's that power coming from? So, that is going to replace an old world multinational system of energy creation and usage, and everything connected with that tax flow. because everything is oil is taxed, gas is taxed, energy is taxed. So the states can get money to do whatever they're doing, and the federal government, of course. So by taking away or by lessening the flow of we'll call it old energy sources, that's really going to impact the flow of money to governments. Now, this is not political. This is strictly business here, but it is political. And the globalization talk is just part of all that, but it's just a whole sea change that leadership out there is working on long term. And just use that for an example, talking about globalization and how it comes down to impact you and me and Joe and Sam, whether it's in New York or in San Diego. Everybody's influenced by the changes. And how fast will this happen? Will it really happen? And it's kind of crazy that here in Southern California, in San Diego, you go to the gas station down the street, and it's right now it's over $4.50, a gallon. If you go 3 hours east of here into Yuma, Arizona, right across the Colorado River, it's at least $1 less, because California has a special dollar tax that they've added, and that's how they fund their surpluses. Okay, and without it, they'd who knows what. But anyway, but you go back east where you are, gas isn't that expensive. It's probably in the threes right now, and probably going down, closer to $3.20 or even $3 in some areas. Out here in California, we're never ever going to see that. I don't know what I'm talking about, but
well, from the global agility point of view, right? An average person, right, can look at it and say, it's one planet. Energy has always been a major element of globalization, because we buy it and sell it to each other and fight over it. And we're currently living in a period where it is one of the weapons of war in the first land war in Europe since World War II. And the price has been jerked around up and down by this conflict between countries. So it's another example of us riding the bull. The biggest problem about the war is that it distracted us from recovering from COVID economically and from addressing the climate change issue. There is a strong reason to understand that the planet has X amount of resources that renew at a certain rate, and that the 8 up to 11 billion people that we're going to have, mostly older, right, have to stay within the renewable boundaries of resources on the planet, right? It's true for everybody, but it's true out there in the future, right? What's true in the present is that we have billions of dollars of people with major investments in the non-alternatives, right? And that we use that energy to stay warm and to move around, right? If you take what I just said and get really angry at one point and stop being able to define the problem or propose solutions, you'll end up with reading the newspaper, right? Global agility would say, you have to look at that as, okay, we're going to define the problem that wide, and we're going to understand it individually in the big picture, and then in our little life, right? To give some enthusiasm, flexibility, and optimism, right, to arriving at solutions. Because one of the strangest things about global agility is that it's when you look at the world from our points of view, without being influenced and manipulated by fear mongering and the press, which sells bad news, right? If you put all that aside and look at the world in the way that global agility will train you to, right, you'll realize that we are sitting pretty on centuries and generations worth of successful efforts, right, to put us in a good situation, right? And right here at the last moment, right, everybody seems to be getting all dithered up, right, and dropping the ball, when mostly we just need to continue to do what we were doing in order to arrive at a stable population, a good economic situation for everybody, a renewal of the sense of what the good life means as opposed to what the luxurious life means, because you got to live within sustainable limits, right? So what does it actually mean to live well? And what do we need from an economy, right? Well, number one, we don't need wars based on economic problems, right? Economics and the economy has to be subordinated to human interest. And you can't do that if you're part and parcel of the teams that are fighting over their self-interest.
Well, let's
right?
talk about, keeping this in mind, let's talk about something more practical right now, and that is the price of shipping things around the world. What, a year ago, 2 years ago, the price of shipping, there was a shortage of containers and it's crazy stuff.
Ports all got clogged up, yeah.
Right. And the cost was sky high to ship, and now it's fallen back. I mean, it's like right down, and so people couldn't get goods. Shelves were empty. People who were being relocated, they couldn't ship anything because there was a shortage, or the shipping lines jacked up. The price is so high, but the company still paid, but just not as many. And so now, for some reason, it's all sorted itself out somehow, and I don't know how it got sorted out, but the prices come way down to ship the same stuff.
It's one of those technologies and its associated set of economic models for business, right, that you cannot put back in the box. It is amazing how inexpensive shipping is relative to other cost factors in production. Period. Ain't going to change. All you have to do is push the boat and it floats on top of the water as far as it can go with the momentum you just gave it, right? I mean, it's just cheap. And we have all these big boats and all these containers and all these ports and all that type of stuff. It isn't going anywhere, right? You can disrupt it with COVID. You can disrupt it with war. You can mess it up. That's easy, but you're not gonna stop using it, right? We will continue to trade when trade is profitable and increases the economies in the two trading countries, period. No one's ever going to, you might think you are, but you're never going to cut your nose off to spite your face enough, right, to put globalization back in the box in terms of economic fact, right? You got to get through how it gets screwed up politically because we're not really organized as a species, and things happen and we can't control it. We don't manage things internationally like we try to manage them nationally, right? So it's usually a cluster. You know what I mean? It just gets messed up. A problem gets messed up further when it's an international problem, right? Until it gets solved, right? You can't solve any of this by having a negative opinion about it or an unrealistically optimistic opinion about it, right? Opinions don't matter, right? And again, all that's big picture stuff. Global agility is what can you and I as normal individuals do? And the core of global agility is that only by understanding each other better, which implies not fighting while you're having an interaction with somebody, only by understanding other people better will we be able to solve problems such as this, or contribute as a public to the solution of these kinds of problems. And I would hate to be, somebody who had an answer to this and some of the power to do it and then propose it to the world, right? Everybody's going to bat it off. You weren't on my side or whatever it was, right? The public, we get the government we deserve in a certain sense, right? We are so far behind the times that whoever can take advantage of us is, right? But as a general public, right, we need to go back and look at ourselves and say, okay, and this is global agility. I am composed of these 2025 cultural definitions that make me different from a Canadian or different from my neighbor, similar to my friend, right? I got these 25 dimensions I need to be aware of because they're important. They say who I am, and I'm involved in a lot of conflicts based on who I am, right? So I got to stop that, right? Now, when I was raised by people who were raised basically in the pre-World War II era or the immediately after post-World War II era. So that my bestowed identity, cultural identity, was given to me, right, back there when rock and roll was born. Thank God. Right? But the world has changed so much that identity, it's not wrong, it's just inadequate. So I look at myself and say, okay, Robert, you have some root in French language ability, feed it, grow that, right? Tap into information that's available in French because they think a little bit differently. They have different concepts. They think about different subjects, right? A lot of them relate back to us, but they look at it a little differently. And that's very, very good information to have as a person. It makes you more globally agile. It makes you look at your country or your group and say, there's an alternative to this stupid thing we're doing. Right. And of course, maybe it is an alternative. Maybe it's a good one, right? Maybe it's not. But at least you're looking outside of your framework of understanding and finding things that could be useful, right? This makes you growing towards the world. You have a conversation with people from the European Union, and it doesn't automatically turn into you pretending you're the American ambassador talking to the European ambassador. You're just two people, right, who seem to understand each other a little bit better because you made the effort, right? If the general public was more globally agile, then somebody, who could move some of the big levers could say, you know what, let's have that debate about corporate taxation and settle it one way or the other, and then implement the solution, because we have budget deficits here, right, and our infrastructure stinks, right? We're going to have to bring you infrastructure, right? Probably go green, right? Because, of this heat thing, right? But it's a national project, just like the building the highways was a national project, right? When was the last time there was enough consensus in any country, right, for the government and the people to get together and put themselves on a concerted, historically large project, right, to get something done, right?
So let's talk about this for a second. Janet Yellen, the Treasury Secretary, formerly involved in the Federal Reserve. I mean, she's really a smart person. She's in China right now, dealing with apparently a very friendly senior minister of finance, according to the press that they're putting out. And the U.S. has a political situation here which is really crazy making and maybe getting worse, but with debt ceiling reaching and China holding all kinds of treasury bonds. And then there's problems with Taiwan for China and Hong Kong. And then there's some kind of deal going on with China, hardballing countries in Europe and Latin America and Africa dangling tons of money in return for building up highways and bridges and infrastructure in all these places that don't have the money to do it themselves. And then China says, okay, and now you give me this when I need it.
Great
And
Silk Road. Yeah.
right. And hardball, they're playing hardball. And it's creating all kinds of changes in Latin America. But on the other hand, it's okay that the US doesn't have to give money and do all these things to everybody in the world. Let somebody else do it. But is it going to backfire on us politically? No, nobody seems to know that. But there's so many places in the world politically that are really dangerous right now. And yet it seems like level-headedness and nature is taking control here, to not shoot off rockets at each other, but trying to figure something out. So, and then you've got some oddballs like what Putin is doing right now in against NATO, and Ukraine is the current target, and then how that plays out in relations with everybody else. I have to stop saying I know, I'm sorry, but but the
I'm
issues that we're
interpreting your
talking
words.
about, yeah.
We're
So
fine.
global agility. How again, what would you say is the answer here? Is certainly cross-border, cross-time, cross-space, cross-culture, but the global agility expertise that you, Rob PIANKA, has in this world of global business, and the way that you sum up in your show notes here about the refugee problem, and if we're not careful, we're all going to be refugees from what we used to know. Do you want to sum up here for this
Yeah, so,
edition before we go to the next show and we go a little bit deeper? But why not tell us what your take is on this?
well, the refugee angle comes in because say you're a fish in a tank and you hop out of the tank, or somebody picks you up and throws you out of the tank and you're a fish out of water, right? That's what a refugee is. It's somebody who's crossed a border and is now not in his environment, can't breathe, right? What happens if there's a hole in the tank and the water goes out? You're still out of water. You're still a fish out of water, right? It doesn't matter that large populations haven't been pushed across some border somewhere. What matters is that the reality of their economy and society and control of things was lifted up, changed, and then dropped back on top of them. And they're pretty much not included in the result. Everybody is a refugee. It's just slower, so you don't notice it, right? A refugee is somebody who misses who they were yesterday because they had status. They were settled somewhere, and now they got nothing. They're nobody. Their identity was stripped from them, right? People are telling them that they are something which is horrible to be, which is a refugee. You're a refugee. They don't like that identity either, right? And they're saying, well, this is what you're going to have to become, right? You're going to have to become, migrate to Germany or whatever the hell it is, right? And they don't like that option either. So identity-wise, it's an identity crisis, right? It doesn't matter if the population wasn't run across the border as a bunch of refugees into camps. If their reality changed so much and they haven't caught up with it, they still act like refugees, right? Now, the thing is that it's really easy as a human being to get mad, right? Before we even apply a word to something that we see, like you hear a growl in the jungle behind you, before you even think word tiger, you are already scared and running, right? We look at stuff, if you had a favorable reaction to something, you will find reasons why it's a bad thing. if you had a good reaction to something, you will find reasons why it was a good thing, right? So this is how we are constituted as a species, right? It's scalable. We like and don't like things individually, and then up on the big picture stuff, we're part of teams like Team America, Team Russia, and we like and we don't like stuff, right? Very easy to get us involved in a conflict. There's thousands of them waiting for you. You just go out there, you have the right badge of identity on you, you're associated with one of the teams, and somebody shoots you or doesn't, right? We have to stop doing that. There's not enough room, space, or whatever it is that we used to have for the damage to be absorbed. We have to be able to encounter each other individually first, but then collectively, right? Without having amygdala hijacks, because the thing about getting angry, right, is it squirts the adrenaline into your blood, and it prevents oxygen from going to the high part of your brain where we have language and concepts and thinking and reasoning, right? Because we need to run fast, right? So you look at entire countries, millions and billions of people in the throe of an amygdala hijack, right? You can't even talk to them, right? And so when is the war going to end? When the adrenaline wears out of their body. And personally, you know that. You have a fight with somebody, you go off into your corners, about 2 hours later, you feel this relaxation and your brain comes back on and says, what were we fighting about? I don't remember. Oh, that stupid thing, right? A globally agile person is really hard to find that button and push it, right? And when you go out in the world, the first button somebody pushes is your nationality, right? You're an American, therefore you're responsible for this thing that happened sometime in history somewhere. Well, I'm sorry, no. When I meet somebody, you cannot treat me as an American. I'm not carrying all that baggage. I'm a father. Treat me as a father. Let's relate on that. We can, as human beings, stop acting like we did when it was possible to act naturally, right? We have work to do. We have to control ourselves now because there isn't any room. Everything I do has implications across the old border, right? My moral obligation follows the impacts of my decisions. It doesn't end somewhere just because that's convenient for me, right? It used to just end someplace where it was like another 1,000 miles before you met another person, right? Every choice that we make, use of electricity. If the planet of 11 billion or 8 to 11 billion people lived the style of life, not the height of GDP, but live the way Americans live in terms of consumption of resources, right? The planet would last. Well, there's a date that they have, the overshoot day, right? When we as a species have consumed more than can be renewed by the planet during the next year. It's about 7 months into the year now. We're eating the seed corn. So we have a moral obligation to control ourselves, stop all this fighting, manage these big events, these big picture things, govern ourselves well, and then really thrive as a species and enjoy ourselves, right? We're not always supposed to be working, right? We got families to raise and art to make, right? And we have a perfect opportunity with the cyber world, which has no limitations of resource. It's not like we run out of paint, right? It's just pixels, for crying out loud, right? We could have an amazing time if we just organized the economy, got our jobs done, paid our bills, and then went off, with our 4-day work week, right? And spent 3 days, being nice to each other or productive or sullen or whatever you want, right? This the human, last hundreds of years and the generations that preceded us set this up. The future is good. All we have to do is stop fighting, right? By being globally agile, because we fight with people we don't know, with these others that we encounter, right? And we're just asking everybody, be a good citizen in your own country and be a steward of the planet outside of it.
So
right?
get some background out there. This is Rob PIANKA, obviously an intellectual guy, and he backs it up with practicality. And you should learn more about Rob PIANKA, I'm looking at your LinkedIn page right now, and the website is globally-agile.com. And Rob PIANKA is PIANKA, and you'll learn all about this guy. He's the founder of Global Agility Services, getting along with the 3,000 plus cultures of human diversity. That's a lot.
It's the easiest thing.
Never ending.
It's always so much fun to talk to you, man. You let me loose.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm learning so much, and I recognize how little I know. I know a lot about being a happy TV talk show host, but your
You're a
level of
wise guy.
thinking is really deep. So I'm just going to read this a little bit here, okay, as we bring this to a close. Due to globalization, stakeholders in our lives can come at any moment from any of over 5,000 cultures. So does that mean that we are so intertwined in history that how we are today is, well, who we are today, but we all come down the pike from somewhere else?
Yeah, we're eyeball to eyeball with each other. It used to be that you could, you had internal cultures inside your country, you dealt with them, and then everybody else was a foreigner, right? Gone, right? You're the boss of your company. Somebody buys your company. It might not be, a compatriot. All right, now your plans to be a VP, have got to go by somebody who might think differently. And then if you cross the street, in my town, you're in another culture. It's not international. It's interpersonal, right? And cultures are great. It's one of the best things about humans are the stuff that they concoct productively and constructively and joyfully in their cultures. Some of the worst things is that they look at somebody from another culture and all of a sudden you're mad and you're having a fight with somebody. What are you having a fight over? Right? We don't all have to like each other or agree with each other. Certainly cultural reasons are nothing to are not worth fighting over. Right? That's a you'd have to limit that statement because I'm not a fool. There are things that I don't accept on the planet from anybody, and they can't claim it's their culture that makes them do it. Right? And I think that's in the end, it's a more serious discussion, but you're not going to have that discussion, those serious discussions with people that you already blew off from the start. My dad was a soldier and a diplomat, right? And you don't, diplomacy, if you don't talk to your enemy, there is no such thing as diplomacy, right? Having the conversation is a victory, right? Because then you can get there and say, well, you know what? We're never going to agree to that. Right. I think you should change that. Right.
What's the role of protocol in all of this?
Etiquette on a personal level, protocol on a group level, right? Essential. The debasement of behavior, right? So that we feel natural and we feel ourselves. I don't know if you've looked at yourself, but there's a lot of muck in there, right? It's your job to clean that up before you send it out, right? As a human being. That is what etiquette in culture, in the sense of culture, and that sense of culture, and what protocol is, right? It's slower, it's self-discipline, it's choreographed, right? But today, in the 21st century, the burden of etiquette and protocol that we need to pick up and carry, we could get used to it. It'll be a lot better than the problems we get by not doing it. It's like you watch the EU talk interminably about something. Well, they get 27 countries to agree on something every now and then. Well, that's pretty good. It took those conversations to do that. And I'm sorry, why should politics be interesting? And why should politicians be heroes? I'm sorry, right? Take care of the babies, take care of the streets, right? Take your nationalistic fantasies in your war and all that type of stuff, and don't bother me with it. We need to be more boring as a species in the sense of here's the things we take care of, right? Here's the KPIs for the human race. Okay, right? Infant mortality. I mean, work on that, and when you solve all that stuff, right? Maybe we can talk about some historical venture we're going to have, right?
This is a college course here. Thank you, Rob PIANKA, for being on Global TV Talk Show, and I welcome you back. The next edition, we're going to go a little bit deeper into all this stuff, talk about world events and things are going on right here in the U.S. and tie it together. And all of that means being agile. In other words, the ability to not close yourself off, but to welcome new ideas and conversation.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about human capital management in the business sense.
We got it. Thank you. See you on Global TV Talk Show. Again.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Signing off.